Hey folks, Will Sager here talking fantasy football. First of many weekly conversations right before you make your lineups. I'm going to try and do less of telling you which players are good and which aren't and be 50-50 like everyone else. And more just kind of look into the mindset that I take approaching the game and hope that it helps people who have less time on their hands to make good decisions and hopefully win their leagues. Um, so here we are, week one. We've done our drafts. We've picked the players that we think are sure shots, and we've also picked the players that we feel can step into major roles with their teams. And I think the most important thing that we look at, especially to set the basis for the season, is timeshares at running back and which receivers get preference from the quarterback. Because in the end of the day, you want a lot of targets for the receivers that you choose, because a lot of targets lead to a lot of yards, potential touchdowns, and all that. So let's look at the running backs first. It's been a really busy offseason, so there's a ton of questions at running back on who's going to get the majority of the carries, who's going to be the passing down back, if it's a committee running attack. These are all things you have to consider. And it's also important to note that it's time that if you have a back that looks like he's going to be doing more of a shared role than you thought, to maybe trade him before this all gets sorted out. So we're looking at a few. We got the one in the Big D, Joseph Randall versus McFadden. Um, I think that they'll split a lot of the work, but from what I've seen in the preseason, if you're looking for a running back that is more like DeMarco Murray, who was so successful there last year, I would say that it's McFadden. Uh, Bigger, more physical, yards after contact, but with him you have to worry about injuries, obviously. So that's one I might stay away from in week one. Uh, Randall, for as quick as he doesn't catch passes, which doesn't help the cause for starting him. We look at another one, Joik Bell versus Amir Abdullah. Um, Everyone's talking about the rookie, but Joik Bell has been, for lack of a better word, the bell cow for them. I like him at the goal line, and I assume that the Lions will score points. Um, so I would choose Joik Bell of the two, but again, that might be one to steer clear of if you can. Um, there's even some really good running backs. You look at DeMarco Murray and Jeremy Hill. They brought in Ryan Matthews in Philadelphia, so you have to consider DeMarco Murray to be on what they call a pitch count, which is you give him a certain number of runs and keep him healthy and able. I still like DeMarco Murray, obviously. He's a first round draft pick for a reason. And that team is definitely going to put points on the board against Atlanta. So I think he's a safe play. Ryan Matthews is more of a desperation flex play, but someone worth holding on to for sure over the course of the season. Jeremy Hill, everyone thinks he might be the best running back in all of fantasy. But it's pretty hard to say that because there's someone, Gio Bernard, there who they expected to do big things and is only a few years into his career with a lot of potential as well. So just a few there. Obviously, if you have the big name running backs that you took in the first few picks, you start them. And then after that, you're left with your gut judgment on it. But that will all sort itself out soon. As a Redskins fan, I look at Alfred Morris and I'm a little bit nervous. Terrible matchup this week, and there's a rookie there, that Matt Jones, that everyone's really excited about. So that's another tough play. Let's shift over to wide receivers. A lot of when it comes to wide receivers, you obviously have several on each team. You have the guys who are the go-to receivers who come back and do it year in and year out. But then you have the guys that you need to complement them. Sometimes it's a tight end. Sometimes it's second, third receivers. And then there's some receivers that play only in three wide receiver sets, but when they're in there, they're normally passing downs and they're targeted a lot. Um, so there's a lot of things to consider with wide receivers. Um, let's see. I think now that if I was going to trade for a few receivers beforehand, some that I think whose stock will rise throughout the course of the year, there's multiple ways to look at it. There's rookies. There's one in Philly, Nelson Aguilar. Um, And you think about Chip Kelly, he's a college-oriented coach, and he's brought in this player from USC from the Pac-10, very athletic, very dynamic. At the same time, they let Jeremy Maclin go. So you will have to wonder if he's going to fill those shoes. And Maclin had a big role for them last year. So he's someone that I drafted in the middle rounds that I think has a lot of potential. If you want to go the other way with it, there's some old veteran receivers. There's a Stevie Johnson in San Diego, who I like, who could have picked up in the later rounds and also could trade for now. I think with Antonio Gates out and Eddie Royal out, they're really looking for people to fill the shoes with lots of targets, lots of catches. And Stevie Johnson is at one point one of the premier slot receivers without a really good quarterback, and now he has Phillip Rivers. So I think he's somebody, too, that you could trade one of your late-round picks for, and that'd be a great investment. Also, there's a lot of receivers that haven't been drafted that have high potential. So if you have a couple at the bottom of your roster that you're not too happy with or that you don't fully believe in, here's some people you could look at. There's Tyler Lockett from Seattle, who's a human highlight reel, really talented. It's just a matter of whether or not they're going to throw the ball enough to him. But I like his ability to make plays. You have Brandon Coleman for the Saints. Huge target, really big receiver, big physical receiver, and they just lost Jimmy Graham. So you have to wonder if he's in line for some of the goal line passes and just red zone targets in general. So he's a good pickup. There's James Jones, who's the most popular pickup, but that kind of goes with the trend of, I don't know, once something gets spread out into this internet world of that being a great pick, people tend to swarm and pounce on it, and it makes sense. He had a bunch of touchdowns with Aaron Rodgers a few years ago, but he's never put up statistical numbers, and that year with the touchdowns stands out far above his other years of production. So I'm not as big on him, and they're also trying to bring up the young receivers, and there's a reason that James Jones was cut from the Oakland Raiders or the New York Giants. And so just got to take that into account and maybe not hop on that bandwagon. Lastly, a receiver, two more. There's one receiver, Percy Harvin, who's in Buffalo right now that is not being looked at all, completely undrafted. And 2 years ago, he was the most dynamic playmaker in the game almost. So if you're looking for a real gamble that has great potential, I would say that's one way you could look. Me personally, I went with the Giants' Ruben Randall when I heard that Victor Cruz was injured. I just think that he's been playing with Eli for years, and now he's in the second. He's the second receiver after Odell Beckham. And you think about it, defenses know what Odell Beckham can do. This is his sophomore run at it, and I think they're going to apply a lot of coverage to him, which makes Randall a good play at least until Victor Cruz comes back. In a similar situation, not quite as good, but if he's available, worth a look is Leonard Hankerson, the old Redskins receiver. He is now in Atlanta, and he will be playing alongside Julio Jones until Roddy White comes back from injury, which could be week 1, but it's something to look at. That game with the Eagles is going to have a ton of passing yards, a ton of points. I think Atlanta will be behind and trying to catch up the whole time, so I could see him being a good fill-in for week 1. That's about it for running backs and receivers. One last piece of advice: if you are absolutely desperate for a quarterback, if you've skipped all that in the draft and you're sitting around with Tannehill or Teddy Bridgewater, another quarterback that's undrafted that I really think has all the weapons and the ability to blow up this year is Tyrod Taylor. Sure, he was competing with E.J. Manuel and Matt Castle at quarterback, and that's not that difficult a competition to win. But when you figure they drafted Manuel as a first-round pick and Matt Castle's been in the league so long and Tyrod Taylor comes from a backup role to Joe Flacco and now is starting, I think Rex Ryan brought him there for a reason, and he's going to do a lot of running, which is easy points for a quarterback if he's a running quarterback. And he has Percy Harvin, Sammy Watkins, Charles Clay. He can dump the ball off to LaShawn McCoy, who can turn a 2-yard pass into an 80-yard touchdown. And I really think if you just want to put someone on the bottom of your roster that could be huge for you, a big pickup, I would give Tyrod Taylor a shot. And yeah, that's all for this week. Thanks for tuning in, and I will talk to you next week. Thanks a lot.